Welcome, welcome, welcome to the InterConnections Network. I'm your host, Monica Mathalier, and today we're joined by Dr. Kakaya, a homeopathic medicine physician or practitioner, which is correct, Dr. Kakaya.
Well, I'm a physician that practices multiple disciplines, including homeopathy, traditional allopathic medicine, and Chinese medicine, and something called applied kinesiology.
Wow, so interesting. Could you define homeopathic medicine? I think there's some. Uh,
Okay, I'll try to give an explanation that will make sense for folks. A lot of people confuse homeopathy with herbal medicine. In
mhm,
homeopathy, you're literally not giving a biochemical substance. You're giving something that's prepared from a biochemical substance. But
okay.
the idea is that you're trying to extract the energetic, the internal energetic nature of a particular substance and give it to a person, not to make the body to change something in the body directly, but to get the body to respond to it.
Mhm,
So now regular doctors kind of look down on homeopathy because they're saying there's nothing in it,
mhm,
um, meaning that there's no chemical substance in it. But people are really have difficulty. You'd have to change your conception of what the human body is, because the human body is more than a biochemical matrix. It's a bioenergetic field, and within that you have a biochemical aspect and you have a physical structure. But in reality, both of these are really just dense energy fields because the atom itself is 99.9% empty space, but a human cell might be made of a trillion atoms. So the body is really a dense energetic field, but you also have an energetic field around the body that's not as dense. And some people can perceive this, some people can feel it, some people can intuit things at different points, like when you walk into a room and you kind of sense whatever information is coming off somebody's field. So homeopathy works at the level of the bioenergetic field, which in turn then can affect the biochemical and physical structure of the body. Sorry for such a long-winded answer, but
no, that's wonderful. I
you know,
mean, it kind of gives clarity because, as you said, so many people um, they don't understand the differences, and you know they don't truly understand the methodology behind homeopathic medicine.
well, homeopathy is probably one of the most popular medical systems on the planet. People don't realize that in the early 1900s, 20% of this country's physicians were homeopaths,
Mm,
right? And homeopath is just, and it's been used in epidemics and pandemics. It has a long track record, and it has excellent results. And in this country, is poo-pooed to a large extent because the prevailing quote unquote scientific model is based on a kind of an outdated classical physics that the matter is everything, which is just, scientifically, it's not correct.
mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we're at. Other cultures have less of a difficulty recognizing it because they're less stuck in just a material conception of the body. For instance, in Chinese medicine, you have acupuncture meridians. And for many years, the Western world really struggled with the validity of acupuncture points. But in the 1950s, a German doctor by the name of Reinhold Voll and a Japanese, I'm not sure if he was a doctor or a researcher, they began doing measurements of the electrical energy on the body. And they found that the points of least resistance on the body surface corresponded to acupuncture points.
Mm-hmm.
So, what this means is that the body has a whole electromagnetic grid because this acupuncture system is based on a DC, direct current electrical energy. So once you understand that that's there in the body, any kind of direct current generates a magnetic field around it. So the body has its own electromagnetic field. And
Mm-hmm.
in Asia, because of their culture and their focus, they recognize that the body is more than just this biochemical substance. So words like chi don't, while they differentiate different types of chi, like liver chi, lung chi, heart chi, they never understood that or perceived that that was just speaking about a physical structure. It was speaking about a energetic framework in which you have an organ, but then there are other things like emotions and types of energies that are associated with each organ. So this is an expanded model of the human body that the Western world is slowly coming up to speed because
Sorry.
that's all right. The
Okay.
Western world is coming up to speed because modern physics has gone beyond classical physics to deal with relativity theory and now quantum mechanics. And basically, when you start talking about quantum mechanics, there's the recognition of just pure consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
meaning what that translates to in Western medicine is that you have something called the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is something that medical researchers hate because the placebo effect means that if you just suggest something to a person, that mere suggestion, if the person really accepts that, can actually bring about a healing, a transformation in a person's health to the extent that you can even do sham surgery and still create a positive effect if that person really believes that they can get better from that, which really speaks to another level of who we are as universal conscious beings that are within this bioenergetic matrix. So the power of your spirit as people who are spiritual or religious rely on has a real impact on the rest of this bioenergetic matrix. And Western medicine tries to get rid of it, but you can't because it's actually part of who we are. So,
Mm-hmm.
and as a practitioner and also as a person that's delved into other cultural systems and just metaphysics in general, I've come to accept this not just theoretically, because when I talk to people that have had near death experiences, when I talk to people that are psychics and have different abilities, when I see people go through spontaneous healing, I have to understand that it's beyond the explanation that modern medicine can offer. And I find these other systems and ways of thinking help me to create a larger picture of who we are and what's possible in terms of health and healing.
You mentioned acupuncture. Um, are there some other methodologies you use? I think you mentioned meditation. Um,
Okay, so, and I'm sorry for the noise on my end as well, but
it's okay.
um, so with meditation, meditation is really the art of focusing on what's real. What do I mean by that? When you sit down to meditate, you're going to be assaulted by things that come up from your bioenergetic field, from your mind, from your body, your emotions. So the understanding in meditation is that there is a consciousness that is, you're in the mind of a larger conscious living reality of this universe. And you can directly communicate and have that contact, whether you call it universal spirit, God, whatever you call it, that consciousness, that presence is always there. And there are essential qualities to this universal life energy that embrace love, peace, All of those things are always present for us. But what happens when we incarnate into these physical bodies, uh, we actually we forget that we're part of this largest conscious stream, and we identify with all the limitations and problems and everyday things that come up that are part of being human. And when we get sick, it's really a time to reset. So everybody gets sick or gets ill at some point. The people that fare better are the ones that hook into or realize that they're part of this larger conscious stream. Whether
Mm-hmm.
that means that they pray, they meditate, they look for internal guidance, right? As opposed to seeing themselves as a victim. I can tell you, I remember during the AIDS epidemic taking care of people. There was some people, if you told them they had AIDS, I remember this one patient, I let him know this is what, the blood work is saying. He had AIDS. He was dead next week. Now, his body, and I've seen that in the hospital, if a person thinks they're going to die and they're so overwhelmed by that emotional reality that this system will shut down. Other people, when they're faced with, all kind of crazy challenges, I mean, we've heard, miraculous stories, they hook into something that's much larger, and so for my clients and for people in general, I run meditation intensive sessions where we just practice the art of aligning ourselves with what's real, aligning ourselves with consciousness, resetting ourselves so that it's much so that I call it um, life energy strain.
Mm-hmm.
Life energy strain is from all the emotional, all the issues you have to face, for poor eating that then stresses other parts of your body, being in, emotional, being in environments that are not positive, that detract from you. All of this, it detracts from your life energy. That's why people that are more oppressed in one country, they're going to die before other people because of the life energy strain of just trying to be yourself,
Wow.
right? So, but your true self, that internal consciousness is always there. It's always present. And with effort, you can actually choose to align yourself with that so that your perception of yourself, your awareness expands beyond your limitations, beyond what you think is, what's possible. For instance, you think about Dr. Martin Luther King and what people went through in the civil rights, you know, movement. If they were to just think about the reality that they're living in and what they wanted to change, it would seem impossible, right? From just looking at the environment. But when you're aligned internally and you're dealing with universal principles of spirit, peace, love, justice, all of that, and that is strong enough to carry the day. And of course, we're looking at Black Lives Matter at this point and all the energies that have come in with the pandemic that's forced people to reevaluate who they are, what they are, and how they want to live and what's acceptable. So that you find even white folks, people of European descent, have realized this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable because these are other human beings. So that takes a level of consciousness that's moved beyond just your ego self, beyond the privilege that you have, beyond the smaller perception that you have of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
To really realize that, wait a second, we are all, spiritual beings having a human experience. And unless we treat each other in that way, this whole deck of cards is going to fall apart, which is
Yes.
kind of where we're at now. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because the old model of how we deal with each other, of how we support and nurture one another, of what it takes to just survive, that's only working for a very small percentage of the population. Everybody else is basically wondering, well, living a life of debt, wondering, I mean, and even worse. And then what happens, we turn in on ourselves we become victimizers as victims, and it just goes on from generation to generation. And right now, because we're no longer just playing with tanks, with bows and arrows and things like that, we're playing with, microbes, atomic energy, and microbes that don't know any particular boundaries. They don't respect any war, right? So different forces have been unleashed, whether we say by human design or part of a master plan that is really going to really force people to actually spiritually evolve, right? To cultivate a level of consciousness where we have to have a basic level of heart centered respect and understanding of who we are and our connection to this whole planet, because this will just be something else for 100,000 years from now. Somebody be digging up our remains and wondering what happened. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, in light of what you just gave us insight on with Black Lives Matter, how do you feel everything is going with this pandemic right now?
Well, I think the public is caught between a rock and a hard place in this country, particularly because, I mean, at one point, the World Health Organization and Fauci said it wasn't necessary to wear masks, you know, and now clearly, as time goes on, people are realizing that is necessary, right? On the other hand, we're also told that certain drugs don't work, but there's been misrepresentation of research to the point that that information has had to be pulled out and say, look, we made a mistake. This isn't true. And now drugs like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine are being looked at again because they really have a track record of being safe drugs, and they're going to be effective, in early stages of illness when you're just trying to prevent viral replication. So then on the other hand, you don't hear anything about what people can do to boost their immune system. It's just trying to be looked over, and you have billions of dollars that are being invested in research around vaccines, which have not worked with other coronaviruses, do not work with the flu shots every year. And there's so much information relative to diet, to all kinds of plant medicines that um, have some of the same capabilities as these drugs that are being talked about and are, in terms of being speculated to be used. So, um, for whatever reason, everything that comes up that could be used outside of just public health measures, which are important in terms of the mask, the social distancing, right? Everything else is like it's kind of poo-pooed, and everybody is on hold for vaccines,
Hmm.
which, frankly, it's just really suspect. That whole piece around this is the only solution when there are viable solutions relative to different nutrients and botanicals that are already in the medical literature and have been researched.
Do you think that has anything to do with the success or the lower numbers in other countries?
Okay, so I think other countries are more homogeneous. You know, basically, they listen to science. You know, uh, and they're open to other modalities. Not everybody is waiting on the World Health Organization and vaccines that are going to be produced. I mean, they're using other things and there are other medications that are already out there. There are tons of reports on how hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin have been used by physicians around the world, and with success, when they're used properly at the beginning of a viral infection. Once that virus is replicated to the point that the immune part of the what's called the adaptive immune system, the T cells have been so dampened that they don't work in terms of what they do to fight the virus, that you have what's called a cytokine storm, which is the other part of the immune system is trying to pick up to make up for it. but that causes all kind of inflammatory problems and becomes destructive to the tissue. But at the same time, there are plenty of botanical medicines, Japanese knotwood that has resveratrol, transresveratrol, emodin, um, elderberry, astragalus, isastis root. There are any number of substances that can be beneficial and helpful to people that we're not being made aware of. So myself, I haven't really had to prescribe hydroxychloroquine. I haven't had to prescribe any of these things because I use herbs and homeopathy. But most people don't have access to that. But you would like your doctors to know about what drugs they can use. And there was so much misinformation that was put out that even doctors are confused. Doctors have had to, get online and talk about what they think is going on and what alternative things can be used. And it's a public health disaster. So you see all the people that have been believing Trump. I mean, his numbers are going down because his supporters are dying. you know,
Wow.
I mean, literally, it's a shame.
Hmm.
People are just suffering because they don't want to. They want to ignore the science because they see other things that don't make sense about how the science is being used and how vaccines are being represented. But at the same time, nobody is talking about the natural supplements, botanicals, homeopathics, and nutrients that can be used.
Hmm. So something I think I mentioned to you in the conference call we had. Were you ever able to find out any information about what they're using in Africa? They talked about something they were using in Africa and the success of it.
Okay. I'm not sure what's being used in Africa, and I want to say several things about that. Um, you're going to find in any traditional society, people are using different kind of botanicals and things that actually may work and be effective in that particular setting. The problem is one, and it might be totally true. For instance, when I did research and studied and traveled in Africa, interviewing traditional healers, I actually found there's a group called Promitra, and they actually came up with a substance that was developed by traditional healers in Senegal that is effective against HIV. And this was documented by research and lab work that the Ford Foundation actually supported. That was about 10, 15 years ago. That hasn't come to market. So, and there are many factors involved with that, but part of that, when I've tried to do anything with people, folks in Africa, is one is you have to be able to source different herbs so that you have a supply to meet the demand that's actually going to be developed. So there's a whole level, another level of infrastructure that has to be in place. I mean, in Ghana, they have a fantastic hospital there on traditional medicine outside of Accra, and they vet different medicinal compounds that are actually there in Ghana, but sourcing the material, getting it out, trade, same thing in Nigeria. So yeah, you're going to find in any traditional culture, you have people that have that level of connectedness to spirit, to plants that will actually tell you what's going on. When I was in South Africa, actually, I was in Zimbabwe, and I remember I was addressing a council of bishops, right? And they wanted to hear all about, traditional medicine and herbal medicine. I said, that's good, but you understand that the genesis of that is not something in a laboratory. People are dreaming. People are going into trance and talking with the plants, and figuring out what needs to be used in part through observation, but also that direct kind of communication. It was like, oh no, we don't want to hear about that. We're interested in the plant. We want to hear about the other stuff.
Hmm.
So again, people limit themselves based on their culture and belief system, and not realizing that we are all divine spirits that are just here, manifesting, having a human incarnation. And we can't let culture and circumstances limit us externally. We have to accept who we truly are. And, the sky's the limit, you know.
Sky's the
So,
limit.
right.
I am just so grateful that you took the time out to come out and talk to us and to give us some insight and information. I think at this point, people really needed something other than conventional medicine, as you mentioned earlier, some way to become more centered and find different ways to deal with their stressors. And I think this was a wonderful opportunity. Um,
Well, they can certainly find out more. There's a lot of information on my website, healinghealthservices.com. The meditations that I hold twice a week on Sunday and Thursdays, they're open to everybody, and they can find out about that. I'm doing a consciousness intensive that'll probably be starting the first week in August, where we go on and we meditate, twice a day together. Um, I'm doing a workshop on an expanded understanding of hypertension, so we can look at the types of hypertension, the different drugs, and how they fit into those different types. But again, using just an energetic principle, looking at the body through nature as opposed to a microscope, we can also see other botanicals, other nutrients, biofeedback type things that you can do that will help depending on the type of hypertension that you have. Not everyone has the same hypertension, meaning the genesis of the hypertension comes from a weakness or an overload of maybe one or two particular systems or organ systems in the body. So that becomes important so that you actually get that knowledge and understanding so you can figure out what you can do to minimize the amount of drugs that you have to take and possibly heal yourself.
Wonderful. At the end of the show, we're going to make sure we share all of your information
Sure,
and whatever information you feel would be beneficial um, in connecting with you. We would more than happy. We would love to share it.
sure. I mean, my website, my office. This is a. You're in New York, right? I'm in
Yes,
California right
sir.
now. I'm bi-coastal, so
Yes,
yeah, certainly my phone number. I mean, it's all good. It's all good.
absolutely.
So,
Well,
right.
thanks again, Dr. Kakaya.
Okay,
Greatly appreciate your insight and information and your direction.
okay. Thank you for having me. All right. Good night.
Good night.